That was a quick week, Dee.
Because we recorded on Monday and now it's only Friday.
And so we are back to our usual recording schedule.
Let's go. Welcome to the Garden Angelus, where we talk about flowers, veggies, and all the best dirt. I'm Dee Nash from Guthrie, Oklahoma, where I garden on an acre and a half out of 7.5 acres out in the country.
And I'm Carol Michael from Indianapolis, Indiana. I have a suburban garden measured in square feet. It's about a third of an acre.
We call ourselves Garden Angelus because we are evangelists for gardening. We love gardening and we would love for you to love it too.
Yes, we do love it. And we aren't afraid to spill the beans and tell all of our gardening secrets, the good, the bad, and even the ugly. But that's enough of who, what, when, where. Let's move on to this week's episode. Hello, Dee.
Hello, Carol. How is that garden in Indianapolis growing?
It's growing hot, is how it's growing.
Yeah, it's hot here too. Yeah.
So I've been getting out early every morning to weed, and I was very grateful that on Tuesday I was herded inside by thunder, and I thought, thunder, that means lightning. Go inside,
Yeah.
and we got a half an inch of rain that I didn't even see it coming. So that
Good.
was good.
That was extremely good news.
Wednesday, I about done up. I was done up, as my grandmother used to say, because I weeded a bunch, had to change clothes. I got so dirty weeding, mowed the grass, and then I was hot.
Do
So,
you not usually have to change clothes when you've been out weeding
yeah, but
or take a
well,
shower?
if you're going to weed, you should be able to go right into mowing, but I was even too dirty to go right into mowing. I had to clean myself up a little bit. I mean, I didn't shower, but I had to put on different clothes. Anyway,
Oh, okay. I don't understand that, but I believe you. It
yeah.
sounds
Just
I
trust
just would
me.
mow.
I had dirt all over me. I mean, dirt,
Yeah.
not
Well, Carol, I have dirt on me right now. I just looked down at my ankle and I don't even know how I got that dirt because I didn't even step in the beds. So I'm not, I mean, I just get dirty just by going out there and breathing.
there you go. Well, I shouldn't tell this story about myself, but my mom said she could send me out the front door and I would come in the back door filthy dirty, and she had no idea what I had done in between. And I don't recollect this. But anyway, yesterday, Thursday, more weeding out in the on tons of stuff out there. And then this morning I was out there like a little early bird and I fertilized all the containers, and I did go ahead and fertilize in the vegetable garden with some organic fertilizer. And
Mhm.
I picked my first little summer squashes. They're little, but it's a variety that Burpee sent me a couple plants for, and I shoved them out there in the garden. And it's something called, I'm going to pronounce it Rocio, Rocio,
It
Rocio,
might
Roci,
it might be
Rocky.
Rocio. I mean, zucchini is Italian, so C's. I don't
Yeah,
know.
they're a light green color. Just
Cute.
they're very nice, and they're only supposed to get like 8 inches long. So I picked them at about 4 inches. They'll be delicious. How about your garden?
Oh, I've been busy. Been busy, busy, busy. So I opened my garden for 4 days for four specific groups that had asked to come visit, and I'm not going to do that again because that is hard. You're open 4 days in a row,
Yeah.
and anyway, I don't know why I didn't tell them all just to come at one time, but the National Daylily Convention was in town, and they asked me to be an open garden on Thursday and Sunday before and after the convention. And I thought, oh, well, what about Friday and Saturday? And yeah, that was dumb. Anyway, deadheading daylilies and roses. And I'm still cutting back asters sometimes for the second time because sometimes they want to grow again because I
Yep.
live in a warm climate. And I'm propping things up. You know the drill.
I
And
do.
then I decided I wanted to spread my dark blue larkspur all around the garden. So I've been taking the seeds and throwing the seed heads down in different places. And because I like that blue in the spring, right after the woodland
Right.
phlox. And it's easy to pull up where you don't want it. So several people asked for larkspur seeds and I gave them to them. And then other people were like, no way, because some people don't like it spreading nature, but I mean, it's easy to pull up, so I don't really understand that.
I
So
don't either.
I'm pulling a lot of those up. I mean, what other plant can you get that shade of blue? And well, you can also get them in white and kind of that weird purple. And there's
Yeah.
also a dope. There's one that has it's two colors. Let's see. Oh, so I have a little sad news to report.
I'm reading your sad news, and our listeners should take a moment and prepare themselves.
Yeah, I'm still fighting something that is eating my zinnias, my celosia, every other plant in my cutting beds. And so Jennifer from Ladybug Flower Farm thinks that it is the head clipping weevil, which I had never heard of. And it's a type of beetle that she also fights in her garden. And she said, "Is it just clipping stuff off at the top and then leaving it for you?" And I said, "Yes." And she goes, "That's the head clipping weevil." And I said, "Okay, what do we do about that?" Not much. So I've been looking for cutworms around the bottom. You know how you do, how you
Right?
dig.
Right?
Haven't found a single one. And we're kind of at the end of the season for cutworms. So I don't know. Anyway, so guess what? I had to buy more zinnia seed. Do you
I
remember how many packets of zinnia seed I had at the
Yes,
beginning of spring?
a
I had
ton.
32.
They're all cut. Oh my gosh, that's really sad.
It is. Well, I've got some that have made it, but not enough to also go later in the year when I need more holes filled. So I planted some in the potager instead because there's nothing over there.
Right.
Whether it's and it can't be rabbits because the rabbits it's too tall. So and it's not deer because they just eat all to the ground. So anyway, I'm going to move them to the garden when they're bigger because that seems to work. And
Yep.
I also took all of my it's a tea that people drink. Can't think of it right now, but I'll think of it in a little bit. Any plant that this creature is not interested in, which means feverfew. Strong smelling plants like feverfew, they don't like nicotiana, stuff like that. I've been moving those over by the what's left of the zinnias that are in there. So far,
Cool.
that seems to help work. And then I hid all of my sunflower seeds from the crows and this creature in my common milkweed because they can't see it. So I'm trying all my skill set. And then
All the tricks.
other than that, I mean I don't have a fortress. So other than that, I'm taking all the disease leaves off the tomatoes. They have a lot of leaf disease this year, but it's because of the rain we got. But everything else looks really grand and they're producing tomatoes, so I don't care. How about favorites?
Well, before we get to favorites, let me talk about zinnias because I planted some of the Zahara zinnias up at the neighborhood entrance.
Uh-huh.
First of all, it's hard to get enough water up there without spinning, just going back and forth. So
Right.
they suffered a little from that. Then I got them to turn on the irrigation system, but I noticed the other day I don't think he's got it set right, and I don't think it's actually turning on the sprinklers that would water those flowers. So,
Uh-oh.
and then they came and mulched on last Saturday and half buried them anyway. And something's been eating them, but not eating them off, just chewing on the leaves. So I've been watering again, and I went ahead and fertilized them because hope springs eternal. And a neighbor came by. I don't know when I was out there last Tuesday or whatever morning, looking good, and I says, "Looks like crap." I knew this neighbor. I'm like, "Thanks, but it looks like crap right now. I'm about to pull
That's
them
how I
out."
feel. Yeah, with my cutting garden. I'm like, it looks like crap. But Jennifer came by yesterday to get some lavender because the lavender's great. And she said, "Dee, it doesn't look as bad as you think it does." And she goes, "You've got a lot of stuff you can cut and take in, so do it." I said, "Okay. Yes, ma'am."
There you go. All right, now we can play favorites.
Okay, you go first because mine's a little confusing.
Yours is confusing. My favorite is those Van Gogh's fantasy sunflowers we bought last year from Sunflower Steve.
Yes.
So I just cut those off and kind of laid them down in this one bed. But anyway, a bunch of seed must have fallen, and I had a bunch of volunteers that came up this spring, and I
Uh-huh.
thought, them's free seed. So I just went
And
ahead
they're
and let them
pretty.
grow. And so I have sunflowers earlier than I've ever had sunflowers.
Hmm.
And I was inspired actually to write a post about self-sowing annuals in the vegetable garden because there's about four of them out there. And
Like my larkspur is going to be.
yes,
Hmm.
exactly. So anyway, they're beautiful right now, and I still have that problem that they're on the fence. It's kind of on the north side of that garden, so I never see the sunflower because they're always facing the other way.
Man, your neighbors are lucky, aren't they? Now, did
Oh,
they come up with a bunch of different things like the
yeah.
Van Gogh
I've,
mix? I bet they
yeah,
did.
they did. They did. So we'll see. But I was excited. That's my favorite. How about yours? Yours? Go ahead. Explain this to
So
everybody, Dee.
I'm gonna try. Okay, so I have white and green false Queen Anne's lace, and I this year I've tried growing it from seed. I've never had a bit of luck. So this year I was at Leah's Commonwealth, and she had some in plugs, or she had started it as seed, and it was coming up quite a few in a bunch. And I bought a whole bunch of them, and I brought them home. And at the time we were talking about what they are, and they are so confusing because the purple one is really, really popular right now because of
Uh-huh.
Floret, other people, other flower farmers. But I was really in love with this white, and I'm really in love with the green. And the green is called green mist. That's the cultivar name. But then it's confusing about the botanical names. So I looked it up. And actually, when I was standing there with Leah, we were talking about how it's confusing because it's Dara or Daucus carota because it's part of the carrot family, which, by
Right?
the way, mostly is poisonous. So don't eat these ever just because they're
No.
carotas. Carrots are fine, but anything else with a carrot leaf type leaf, don't ever eat it because that is the one thing on my foraging group that I'm part of in Oklahoma. Everybody's like, we are not even going to try to identify what that carrot thing is that you're foraging because most of them are all poisonous. These are too. So people who do them for cut flowers, they also have that beautiful, gorgeous, you know, gorgeous thing. And so this is what this is from 3acrefarm.net, which is a flower farm. And this is what they quote about the botanical name. Dara Daucus carota, technically not AMI, AMMI. You'll often see this in seed catalogs under the AMI category. This type is a unique variety of wild carrot, and then their version comes in pink, purple, and white, which is that really popular one. And so here's what I'm going to do this year, Carol.
What you gonna
I'm
do?
gonna I'm gonna first of all spread the seeds from all the ones I have. I'm gonna keep cutting them all summer so they get big.
Right? Right?
But I'm gonna spread the seeds finally, just let them go wherever. And then on top of that, I'm gonna at the time I spread those seeds, I'm also gonna throw out all my purple ones because I have tried everything. I've tried winter sowing. None of it's ever worked. So I'm just going to do this for something different because honestly, that's what I did with my larkspur and it worked. So sometimes nature knows exactly when to throw things down.
There's
Puppies
that
are like that too.
there's that self-sewing theme again. I'm glad I wrote that blog post yesterday.
I am too. I'm really glad you wrote it.
I need pictures of these for the newsletter, Dee. Those sound so beautiful.
I need pictures of the Van Gogh's fantasy too.
You're getting them.
Cool.
I'm going to do a quote. I'm going to do
Okay.
the, oh, we don't have a question of the week.
I actually do have a question of the week because it was asked this morning by Mary Lou, who's one of my clients. She asked me, what do I do about my milkweed? I think hers is tropical. What do I do about my milkweed that is already forming seed pods? And I said, cut it back. And there's two reasons to cut it back, really three. So the two reasons I gave her is and cut the seed pods off. For one thing, the monarchs aren't here right now. They've
Right.
come through and they're probably up in Wisconsin. And then they'll come back through in the fall. And just like all connoisseurs, which the monarchs are, they want fresh milkweed. So your milkweed will have time to bulk up and be better milkweed. Also, cutting off the seeds stops it from stopping what it's supposed to do. Even though it's a tropical milkweed, it if it produces seed, I don't know, it might kind of poop out on you. I don't know. The other reason is it also helps, I think, with OE, which is a disease that monarchs get from other monarchs, and they get it from their wings, the cells on their wings falling on the milkweed. So when you cut your milkweed back, that's a good thing. Always be careful when cutting back milkweed because, like the Daucus carota, it has a sap that is sometimes irritating to the skin. So there you go.
Very good. That is an excellent question and an excellent answer. Now I'll do the
Thanks.
quote. Reflect upon your present blessings, of which every man has plenty, not on your past misfortunes, of which all men have some. Charles Dickens.
I love that one. That's a good
Yes.
one. So, our flower of the week was your idea. Try the neglected biennials, and two of them you listed. Well, horticulture from June 1959 listed foxglove, which is, yeah, foxglove, and hollyhock.
Yes. And so we'll talk about this later probably, but I, as people I've mentioned before, I have the entire set of horticulture magazines from June 1959 because a friend of mine, Teresa, who listens to this podcast, hi, Teresa, she went to an auction. I mean, this is decades ago, and she bid on a box of magazines, and in
Mm-hmm.
it was horticulture from different years. And so she was worked in our front office at work, and I came up one day and she says, "What year were you born?" And I told her, and so she handed me the entire set from 1959. She says, "Here you go." They are very fun to look
Wow,
through. Very fun to look through. But anyway,
cool.
so I looked at it the other day and it just flops open to try the neglected biennials. And so I thought, let's revisit the biennial topic because it
We
is
haven't done it
one,
in a while.
yeah, and it confuses people. So the most common thing that people get wrong about biennials, I wrote it in the show notes.
Oh, they call them biennials, which they aren't. That's not
No.
how you say it. It's biennials.
Yes. And they complete their life cycle in 2 years. First year
Right.
is foliage, second year is a flower spike. And the author noted that June, July are excellent times to sow the seeds for biennials. So they'll get themselves established this year, and then next year you'll have the flower. And he also says that many of the biennials, especially foxglove, bloom sort of in that in between time. The spring perennials are done, the summer perennials haven't really started, and up will pop these biennials.
Yeah, I had thought about that, but they do kind of do that. I also thought of another one that people don't grow very often, and it's Sweet William. Sweet
Yes,
William does that too. And it's a good one because it does bloom in that in between time and it's quite beautiful, but I think people think they're a lot of trouble, but they're not, especially if you winter sow them and then
right.
just set them out. You just give them a little bit of garden space for a year, and then next year they pop up like just gorgeous.
Well, and the other thing too is like Sweet William, for example, people will see Sweet William in bloom, they'll put it in the garden and they think, oh, I'm going to have Sweet William. Well, it's going to die because it's a 2 year plant. It doesn't
Right.
keep going. Now, to go on with our self sowing theme that we seem to have today, a lot of times if you let things like hollyhocks and foxglove self sow, then you'll start to see them every year blooming. And I have a foxglove. It's a digitalis lutea, which is the straw foxglove.
Hmm.
And I, I I couldn't figure out whether it's a true biennial or a perennial, but I did read that it can self-sow and become weedy. And indeed, mine has self-sown and is quite
Yeah.
weedy right now. So that's you have to be careful of that.
My hollyhocks also. I've been growing them long enough now that they self sow. My goal is to do yellow hollyhocks, those yellow ones. Remember, I planted them last year,
Right?
did all that work, and then the fire came through and burned them up. And I thought I had one left, but it just, they are not super tough anyway. They're not a tough variety. And so they just couldn't make it. But I have pink ones. Last year I had some of the best pink ones I ever had. And I personally I can't really grow foxglove very well, digitalis. It's too hot here. Although the last few years we've been having these long, cool springs, so it would work. But I can really grow some good hollyhocks when something's not eating them.
I can't grow the traditional foxglove very well. They sell it around here as what they call a temperennials, where it's I think because it's
Where
too
it blooms and
confusing.
dies.
Yeah. Well, it may or may not overwinter. Let me tell you, people, it's not going to overwinter. If it's
No.
bloom, it's a biennial. So, but if you can get things like the hollyhocks or like this straw foxglove to self sow, you can end up with a lot of plants, and they kind of self select.
Yeah,
So
I
the
do.
ones that are going to make it are the ones that sounds so weird and obvious when
No, it
you know,
doesn't sound obvious. It doesn't. I don't think.
The stronger ones are going to survive, and so hopefully you end up with the ones you wanted growing again the next year.
So, in connection with that, Gardener's World has their favorite biennials, their 10 favorite biennials to grow.
Yeah.
And interesting, Angelica sylvestris is on here, which looks a lot like Daucus
Uh-huh.
carota or Dara.
Right.
And people grow it. Yeah, that's another biennial. I've tried to grow it. It doesn't love it here. It's a pop. This is a poppy called Nudicol. It's an Arctic poppy. Ha, that's not going to grow here. Then they have foxgloves. Then they have Dianthus barbatus, which is Sweet William.
Right.
And then they have the, I don't know if I'm pronouncing this right, the Aquilegias.
Yes, some columbines are actually biennials, and so
Yep.
but you let them self-sow, and then you'll never be without them.
And then they list Hesperus matrionalis. I
Never
don't know
heard
what
of
the
it.
common name is of that one, but I bet we can't grow it here. They're teasels, which they love. Nicotiana sylvestris. Yes. Sometimes, okay, so they say here that it is really actually a short lived perennial, but it can be grown as a half hardy annual or wintered and treated as a biennial.
You're not
Isn't that
overwintering.
interesting?
Yeah.
Yeah,
If
not
that's
here.
no, it's just going to
Not here.
self-sow.
And then, of
Again,
course, they mention hollyhocks.
yes.
Oh, and honesty, which is Lunaria annua. Yeah,
That's a rather weedy flower, and so I
it
would be
is.
very careful about planting that. My grandmother used to have that, and you save those seed pods, which look like little coins. That's why they call it.
Yes.
And she always had a vase of those dried seed heads on her china buffet, I remember.
Hmm.
So I'd be
Yeah.
very careful
So
with those.
that's their 10, which is funny because a lot of them we can't grow as biennials because they're really kind of zone 8 for the most part. We are not. We are not zone 8, you and I.
No, no, we are not zone age. But the important thing to remember is what is the important thing to remember?
I think the important thing to remember about biennials is that they might be worthy of a place in your garden. If you've got a little place to tuck them in and
Uh-huh.
just ignore them for a year, you could have something really special the following year.
Yeah, and I
How's
was
that?
thinking about I think that's a good idea. And I was thinking now about hollyhocks and the one bed along the back of my garden that's against the fence. That would be a good place to let hollyhocks go.
That would be a perfect spot. And I love the hollyhocks. I mean, I have a bunch of different kinds. This year I'm growing King Henry,
Hmm.
and so they'll flower next year. But I grew them from seed this year.
Now I have a reason. I need to go up to the greenhouse. I haven't been up there in a couple of weeks. They probably think what happened to her? See if they have any hollyhocks for sale.
Oh, speaking of sales, I went up to the Terracotta up here in Guthrie, which is
I
Guthrie
think
Greenhouse's outlet. Oh my gosh, everything is 75% off. And they're bringing in new stock every week because they have a wholesale nursery. So I bought some more caladiums because I am on a caladium kick. Maybe
I
we'll talk about
guess.
caladiums next week.
Maybe, maybe. But
Maybe
anyway, so that's biennials, not a ton of new information, but just something to think about. And now Carol's going to have to go shopping for hollyhocks.
they are pretty wonderful.
Do that quote and take us into the veggie topic.
We are cups constantly and quietly being filled. The trick is knowing how to tip ourselves over and let the beautiful stuff out. And that's Ray Bradbury, who is one of my all time favorite writers, one of the best writers out there.
Yes. And I was talking to somebody who was pleasantly surprised to find out that all of Ray Bradbury's papers and documents and everything are housed, I think, here in Indianapolis at the IU campus here in Indianapolis.
I think you're right. Mm-hmm.
And so
And if you want to know about what Ray Bradbury thought about writing, he was quite a prolific speaker and he was often recorded, and all of that's on YouTube. And he was very funny. And
that
people
did.
know him really well for all of his spooky stuff, like Something Wicked This Way Comes and different things like that. Oh, I said that wrong. That's an Agatha Christie, but his is very similar to that, right?
Okay,
Oh, I
right.
don't know. There's a very famous book about a carnival, and then he wrote Fahrenheit. for whatever 400 and something. It's 431 or whatever.
And
So
what's that book he wrote? Dandelion Summer?
that's what I was trying to say is that the one of the books that I love the most is the one about, isn't it Dandelion Summer? It's a trilogy about his boyhood. Green Gage Summer is one of them. Dandelion Days,
Uh,
maybe. We should have
I'm
looked
looking
this
at,
up since I
yeah,
love
I'm
him
looking
so
it up
much.
since we're Dandelion Wine is the book,
Yes.
but
And then
it's
there's
about
Green
his
Gage
summer.
Summer. Yeah.
Yes. There would be,
He's written a bunch of stuff.
it
He's
would be
really
worth,
good.
that's a rabbit hole worth going down is to listen to Ray Bradbury talk about writing.
Yeah, he's pretty wonderful. All right, our vegetable this week was my idea, but you did all the research on it.
Well, I
Thank
didn't
you.
do much research. I just wrote what I know. We're going to talk about eggplant.
Yeah, so I don't love Black Beauty, which is the classic
That
Italian
classic,
eggplant.
that's what my dad always grew. That's what I grew. I mean, it's when you
It's a big, bulky eggplant.
when you see all the different varieties that are really available, there's white, pink, green, black, variegated purple, white, smaller eggplants,
Hmm.
long ones, some that are like the shape of an egg. And then remember when we saw meatball from
Yes,
Burpee?
yes.
That is a big, heavy, and they advertise that as a meat substitute that you could slice and basically fry, I guess, the meatball and put that on your sandwich instead of meat.
Well, and plant-based diets are more popular than they used to be, at least a day or two a week.
Yes.
And so people use eggplant like mushrooms because they do have a good texture. And so you can use them as a meat substitute. So I'll just say that, well, you wrote there's an eggplant for every garden and they can also be grown in containers. Yes. And I grow mine, and this year they're in the Vago garden containers. I'm growing two white ones. One is called Bride. I can't remember the other one. And then I'm growing Fairy Tale, which I love. I think Fairy Tale is one of the best eggplants out there. And isn't it an AAS winner?
Yes. So I went over to the All America Selections website and I thought, I wonder what eggplants are winners. And I did not see Black Beauty, by the way, but Fairy Tale,
Mm-hmm.
Hansel, Gretel, and
I
one
grew
called
those.
Patio Baby.
Never grew Patio Baby, but I've grown Fairy Tale, Hansel, and Gretel. I see a theme there. It must be the same producer, same
Must
hybridizer,
be,
but
must be.
they all did really well. I think Fairy Tale's the best of them. It produces more eggplants per plant. They are on the smaller side. They're great for stir fries. And in fact, mine already has fruit on it, and some of my other eggplants don't. I'm also growing Rosa Bianca this year, which is a small Italian that is very beautiful. And I've got a fruit on it too. And let's talk a little bit about how to grow them. They, like all things in the nightshade family, like a lot of good organic fertilizer. And they like
Yes,
to grow in really good soil, and they like it hot,
they
which
do.
is true of most things
Do
except for
not rush your
potatoes.
eggplant out to the garden when it's still
No,
cool and especially at night. Hold it
it
inside because
suffers.
that it suffers. And the first thing that finds it as soon as you plant it out when it's still kind of cool are those flea beetles. Nasty
Right. And if
things.
the eggplant is bigger, it can handle the flea beetles.
It
But if
can.
it's small, it can't. And also take your handheld sprayer and spray the undersides of the leaves on your eggplant, and that'll help get rid of flea beetles too. They seem to me to be very much like spider mites in that they like to suck, and they like to gather under the leaves. So those are easy, easy tips to get them. Always cut off the fruit as soon as it's ready. You can tell it's ready because it will be shiny in appearance. And once it goes to dull, it might be past ready, but you might still be able to eat it. Cut it off on the stem. Don't try to twist it. What
Yeah.
else can I say? I mean, I love eggplant. I grow it almost every year. Unfortunately, I think eggplant is also high histamine, just like tomatoes,
Right.
peppers,
Right. Right.
mushrooms,
Yep.
avocado, all the things I love to eat. So I have to be careful how much I eat in a week because I have mast cell activation syndrome, and high histamine diet is not good, but I still love it. So I do eat it. So I eat it
Well,
in stir fries.
the other thing I was going to say is They are fairly easy to start from seed, but
Yes.
just like peppers, a little bottom heat on the
I,
container that'll make them pop up faster. They'll
I'd say,
germinate without
well,
it.
I don't think they germinate well without it at all. I've grown them for years, and I'm telling you, peppers do okay, although they love a little bit of a heat mat. But eggplant, I always have to use a heat mat for it. Every other time I've
Huh.
tried it, it just sits there. So, I mean, I'm not saying it won't, but why not just do the heat mat? It's easier.
Why not indeed? And I'll tell you this, I'm not growing any eggplant this year, Dee.
Oh, that's too bad for you.
It just didn't it just didn't factor in, and I didn't see any plants that I really said buy me, buy me, buy me.
Right.
So I'll go down to the farmer's market down in Greenwood on Saturdays occasionally, and somebody will have a few eggplant because the one way that I like to have them is breaded and fried, which is the worst thing in the world to for you. So,
I made fried squash last night. It was great. So anyway, it's one of my very favorite vegetables. And years ago, I did a post when we were doing Dear Friends and Gardeners,
uh-huh.
and I put in my Thai eggplant recipe in there. So we will link to that. And I put a link for our newsletter.
Very good. That will be excellent. I'm going to do a quote and we're going to go to the bookshelf. Miracles are a retelling in small letters of the very same story, which is written across the whole world in letters too large for some of us to see. C.S. Lewis.
I like it.
Oh.
So you have our bookshelf. The first one I have not read, the second one I have.
So I'm into these gardening essays, I guess you'd say. So I picked this up a while back. Time in the
Mm-hmm.
Gardener, Writings on a Lifelong Passion by Elizabeth Sheldon. This came out in 2003. New copies are not available, but it's really kind of this charming book of essays that she wrote about gardening. And she died in 2013. So this was 10 years before she died. And she has a couple other books to her credit, which if I was a worthwhile podcaster, I would know what those are, but I don't.
That's
Anyway,
so. Did you like it?
I am still reading it. And this is one of those, you don't have to read it in chronological order.
Right, because
But
it's a series of essays.
yeah, so the essays are divided into three sections: what I've learned over time, timeless plants, some of my favorites, and gardeners of other times. And so, I went right to gardeners of other times, don't you? And
Sure.
I've been reading those. And she actually mentioned somebody that's on my list for Lost Ladies of Garden Writing.
Yeah.
And she said, here's an example of her writing. She says, I have a friend who is persuaded that working with plants improves the character. She thinks it even operated on Vita Sackville West and hunts eagerly, almost pathetically, in biographical accounts of that talented and formidable lady for indications that a certain mellowing manifested itself in her later years.
Did she? Did Vita or Vito, however you say her name, did she mellow?
I
Because the
cannot.
reason I
Let me tell you the next sentence. I cannot agree
okay,
that Miss Sackville West ever underwent a personality change, and I'm certain that all evidence points to the fact that she remained more preoccupied with her plants than with her progeny, and more charitable to her flowers than to her friends. In fact, as she grew older, she withdrew more and more from the world and the people in it, taking refuge in her garden.
hmm. So that was interesting because the guy who wrote The Grove, which we talked about last week, Ben Dark, he did a whole thing about Vita and how she really did not like the I mean, she was not. She was kind of hard on the masses, as it were.
Yes.
So yeah. So I thought that's interesting.
It's just, I would say that Elizabeth is, uh, she has her opinions, and I just think it's just good writing. And because she passed away in 2013, I was able to go right to her obituary and read all about her.
Mm-hmm.
And, she loved her garden and she loved writing about gardening. And she actually had a book about old gardeners, old garden writers that she was working on. I'll have to look at that again. When she died, she was writing a book about old garden writers.
That sounds like one of those jokes. Old gardeners never die.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah. And then since I was I don't know. I was looking at my books and I pulled this one down off the shelf. The
Hmm.
Gardener's Bed Book,
Yeah, I
Short
love
and
that
Long
book.
Pieces to be Read in Bed by Those Who Love Green Growing Things by Richardson Wright. And this
Hmm.
is a reprint from the Modern Library Gardening, that Michael
Series.
Pollan series. Yeah. And
Mhm.
so there's an entry for every day of the year.
I love that book. I've had it a long time and it sits right by my bedside. And if I don't have something else to read, I pick it up because I
And
often read at night.
he wrote some
Don't
other
you?
bed books. He wrote the Traveler's Bed Book.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know where I read that.
Huh. Interesting.
So I
So
thought
that,
this is good, and I picked it up and I read. I thought, well, the last thing you ought to read is something nice about gardening. So I read the June 20th last night.
yeah, was it good?
It says it's about weather trumperies. When Dr. Johnson advised Boswell to keep a diary, he counseled him to omit registers of the weather and like trumpery.
We talk about the weather a lot. So,
Yes, yes. And then he goes on to talk about how he has 3 barometers in his office. And he goes, what? 3 barometers? Pish posh. For 3 there are. And then he describes these barometers that you have. And
that's
at the
fun,
end of
actually.
each chapter, he's got like a little thing, advice. And the advice for yesterday was peonies and roses last longer for decoration when cut in the bud and allowed to open slowly in a cool place.
You knew that because
I
you did
did.
those peonies.
So this one will include, I think every gardener ought to have this. It's just a fun read. We'll include a link
Yeah.
to it. You can still buy brand new copies over on bookshop.org, or you can get it on Amazon. His original bed book was published in 1929, by the way.
Wow.
So,
Shall I do the next quote and we'll go
yes.
into our dirt? I have enjoyed greatly the second blooming. Suddenly you find at the age of 50, say, that a whole new life has opened before you, Agatha Christie. We've done that one before, but I still think it's great.
It is. It is. And it reminds me a little bit. We had this HR director who used to say that every time an employee's salary went up $10,000, which obviously it wouldn't in one year, it created a
Right.
new lifestyle. And like every 10 years, you get to a certain age and it creates a new lifestyle, right?
Oh, I think that's true. And Bill is getting ready to celebrate his 70th birthday on Tuesday, but we're going to celebrate it on Sunday.
Of course. Yeah, that'll be a
Yeah,
fun day.
it will be a fun day. Okay, our dirt. And you found it because I found some different dirt. It turned out not to be good dirt. This is good dirt.
So I found this just popped up in one of my Google alerts. It's from the Daily Mail and it's a article that says 11 things that make your garden look tacky. And so
Okay.
one of the things they said was if it's too neat,
Well, I mean, it just doesn't look real. Okay.
artificial turf. And I got to tell you, I went to Lowe's yesterday. I needed something real quick.
Hmm.
And of course, I was lured into the garden section, even though it's like 90 degrees outside. Do you have you seen how much artificial plants they have for sale in the garden section?
They have artificial turf. Yeah.
They have artificial turf. They have artificial, like, I'll call it boxwoody like panels that you can put like under your deck, on your deck. They
Yeah.
have big panels that you can make your wall look like it's got ferns growing on it.
Yeah.
They've got
Okay.
topiaries, your favorite ones that look like little dog.
Uh,
Anyway, artificial turf, tacky. Narrow beds, tacky. Need nice wide flower beds.
yeah, they should be 3 to 4 feet wide because otherwise you can't do anything in them. They're too narrow.
Plastic pots.
Okay, let me just say about plastic pots. If they're really nice plastic pots, I
Right.
think it's okay because sometimes those are really good for older people so that
Yes.
you can move them easier.
Yes. Just certain ones. Plastic
Yes.
furniture.
Well, I mean, if it's that heavy duty plastic, it looks good.
Yeah. I mean, my plastic table was quite pricey, my table and chairs, and it's technically plastic, but
My mom's plastic chairs, which are my purple chairs at the end of the garden that everybody always wants to see, they're just spray painted plastic chairs, but they're that heavy. Those things are 36 years old.
yeah.
So I would say that he means, or whoever wrote this, means, the cheap plastic.
Right. flyaway greenhouses. And he's talking about those little shelf units that you have like a zip-on lining that you put on your.
Yes,
Those never last. Dead plants in pots. Get rid of those as soon as you can.
try to. I still have one.
And I'm very proud of myself because every summer, like for the last 10 years, there's always been like this little cadre of pots that didn't get potted that's junking up the patio. I've
Uh-huh.
taken care of all of those. I don't have any
Good for
unplanted
you.
pots. Now here's
I
one.
have two.
Too many yellow flowers is tacky. Go figure.
He
I'm
would
gonna
have a
add
hard he would have a hard time in my garden.
I'm gonna add to it. Plastic flowers are tacky. I mean, he,
Yeah.
he talked about artificial turf, but there's this one house that I've driven by, and they have plastic flowers out year round. I mean, and all these
They
little
fade.
figurines and all
They
these little
fade.
figurines and stuff. Anyway,
Yeah.
too
Too many
too much pay,
gnomes.
too many gnomes is a problem. Too much paving,
Yeah.
and then too many gadgets. And I don't know what he means by that. I think he
I don't
means
know either.
like if you have a grill and a smoker and you got I mean if you have it set up as an outdoor kitchen, but if you've just got a bunch of stuff like that sitting around.
I think he's a little bit snobby between you
I
and me.
yeah, it's just fun to think about.
It is fun to think about.
We get our claws out, we go meow meow.
It reminds me of a garden that I saw in Indianapolis. We won't ever say who it is, but she had more statuary, and it was all little tiny pieces of statuary that didn't go together, and signs, and oh my gosh, it was.
Wait, in Indianapolis you saw this?
Yes, it was on GardenCom. I won't. We will talk about it later, but yes, and
I
it
don't
was. There were
even
just so many, so
I
many.
don't have any recollection.
Well, that was a long time ago. I didn't think bad thoughts about it. I mean, it was her thing and it's her garden. Who cares? Right?
Right. I mean, I've driven by this one house on the way to garden club, and I'll tell people that are in Indianapolis, it's on Martin Luther King Drive, south of 38th Street as you approach the art museum. This guy has decorated his entire yard and his house with bicycle parts, and even like the ridge of the roof, he's got like bicycles mounted up there.
You
He,
must be a bicyclist.
I guess. Anyway, I'm going to do a quote. No barefooted tree climbing, mud pie baking, cloud spotting, puddle stomping, bird calling, wild foraging, stargazing, firefly chasing, den building, stream paddling, rock hunting moment with Mother Nature is ever wasted. Nicolette Souter.
Go Nicolette.
That's good because that's what we did when we were kids.
Oh,
Stuff
yeah. It
like
was the
that.
best childhood ever. Really
Yes.
was. It's so funny because my daughter, Megan, who has my grandchild, she says all the time that she's giving her a 90s childhood just like she had. And I laugh and I go, you really had a 1970s childhood because we only had three channels. We lived out in the
Which is
country.
to me a 1960s child like I had, except I wasn't out in the country, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was the same. Basically, the 60s, 70s childhood was the same thing. And
Yes.
so they stayed outside, they read books, they played, that's what we need to get back to.
That is
Okay, that's all
indeed.
my proselytizing for the day. How about rabbit holing?
So mine aren't. I mean, I think I've gone through a lot of shallow rabbit holes, I'll say. So my lost lady, I'll just tell people it's Alice T.A. Quackenbush. And I have discovered new information about her. She's one that I wrote on my blog years ago. And I have most of her books, including one that she signed and dedicated to her secretary.
That is really cool.
And I also figured out I have just 3 Agatha Raisin mysteries to finish listening to. I'm on the
Oh, no.
And so the last 4 are written by R.W. Green, this guy that she basically said, here, finish, keep writing about Agatha. And so they start with a little bit information about MC Beaton.
Because
And
she
so that,
died.
yeah,
We
she
should say
died
she
in
died.
20, I'm going to say 2019, but that could be wrong. But just a little bit more biographical information, which is kind of interesting about how she got started in writing and stuff. So that's kind of
Because she
fun.
did it later in life.
She
She's kind
did.
of an interesting person.
She
So
is. She's
go her.
Scottish
Yes,
lady.
she was. So I've been down in a bit of a rabbit hole about daylilies because I've been trying to figure out some of the new ones And I've been researching because we went to the national convention in 2022 in Asheville and went to Blue Ridge Daylily Garden. And I
Uh-huh.
bought several daylilies there and spent quite a bit of money.
Yeah, I
And
remember.
yeah, Bill could have killed me. But they really refreshed my garden because it had gotten kind of stale. And I'm glad I did it because I bought a bunch of, because you could see them growing. And so you could see which ones were tall and big and beautiful. And it's really made the garden much more beautiful, which makes sense because it takes them a couple of years to gear up. And we're in 2024. And then, but I didn't get labels on a couple of them. So I've been researching to find the labels. And when the guys blew out some of the leaves in my garden, which I did not ask them to do, remember
Yep,
last
I do
spring?
remember.
They lost a bunch of my labels. So I've been
Uh,
back to my, yeah, I've been going back to my map, which was from 2015, and figuring out a couple that I don't know the names of. And so I'm going to get Bernie to make me some more labels. And before someone asks, my labels are from a guy named Bernie Halliday, and it's triple A engraving, AAA. And he's wonderful. They're not cheap, but they last forever if no one blows them out of your garden.
Very nice. I have a
Oh, and I'm
couple of
going to dig a few
daylilies.
out too.
Yeah, I
Anyway,
have some
sorry.
daylilies that I bought over at Sewell's Garden. I think I'm going to
Hmm.
try to figure out what those varieties are. They're just too pretty not to really know their names.
Yeah, I'm going to dig out. Yeah, because you can look them up because they're from Sewell's. I know they have them. And I know one of the ones you have is the giraffes one, which I cannot for the life of me remember the rest of its name. It's called either Walking with Giraffes or something. It's not a Murphy, but it's his,
No, that
it's
doesn't
the,
sound
I think,
familiar at all. The two I know
or,
for sure.
okay.
I know three for sure.
One is ground control.
Notify ground control because that the
Hmm.
flower scapes are like 6 feet tall, and I
Which
moved
is
it.
fun. Yeah,
The other one is Hyperion because it's an old variety from the
I have that
1920s,
one. I have
has
it in two
scent.
places.
And then
Gorgeous thing.
the third one I have, and I bought this at Frank's Nursery and Crafts eons ago, and it's called Eeny Meeny. And
I remember Eeny Meeny.
it's not that pretty, but I've moved it around and so I know where it's at. So those are the three I know for sure.
I thought you had dances with giraffes too.
You know what? If I had a flower named Dancing with Giraffes, don't you think I'd remember?
I don't know. I just really think you had it, but I'm going to send you the link because if you
Okay.
don't have it, it's your type of daylily.
All right. Well, let's do our garden commissions and wrap this podcast episode up.
Yeah, because we have chattered on, haven't we?
We
All
have.
right, I'm going to put on my heavy duty tick clothing and dig out the daylily Kwanzo. Kwanzo is a double daylily that has rhizotomous roots, and it's a nightmare when it's in your garden. And it rode in on another daylily that I bought years ago, and I have to dig it out about every 5 years because I never get all the roots. And people think it's pretty. Yes, it is pretty, I guess, but it needs to be in its. If you're going to grow it, don't grow it with other things because it'll smother them. And right now it's trying to smother one of my Climb Raycamp daylilies, which is an old one, but I really love Brother Raycamp and I loved Mr. Klein. So you can't do that. So I'm going to do that. That's what I'm doing. What are you doing?
So I'm going to continue my habit of getting up early and getting out to the garden before it gets hot. So I need to do a lot of editing in Plopper's Field. Those straw foxglove have got to go. I
Yep.
need to tie up tomatoes. I got to keep the weeds down the garden. I'm speaking twice on Tuesday.
Oh, really? Twice? Why twice?
Well,
And
so a garden
where? Where
club.
are you doing this?
There's a garden club on the southwest side of town, out in Franklin Township, and she asked me, and it's kind of a weird thing, but it's Secrets to Happiness in Your Garden, which is an old talk. And then someone I know from the writing association emailed me and said her church ladies luncheon, they wanted a speaker about gardening. And so I could do the same. I'm basically doing the same talk twice
Ugh,
in the same
twice
day,
in one day. That is really
but I'm
hard.
doing a shorter version for the church lunch people. And then, so I got to spruce that up a little bit, but it won't be
Ugh.
bad. And
Okay.
then I haven't put that arbor together. It's, ugh.
Carol.
Well, it's so hot, and the weeding was kind of a priority. And so I thought,
Yeah.
well, maybe tomorrow morning I can get that out there and throw a couple scarlet runner beans down and see what happens. So that's it.
Whew, you're busy. We better wrap this up so you can go put that arbor together.
Well, I'm not doing it today because I'm all cleaned up now. I don't want to get all dirty again.
You're
Thank
not
you
going
for.
to get.
I get all hot and sweaty. Thank you for listening
Oh,
to the Garden Angelus. I hope you've hit that subscribe button so you don't miss a single episode. We publish every week on Wednesdays at 12 a.m. Eastern Time.
I know I say this every week, but if you listen to Apple Podcasts, we'd love a 5-star review. That helps us get noticed by others. Could you also share our podcast with your friends? Word of mouth is still the best way to get the word out there.
And be sure and check out our show notes for links for more information about today's topics, plus links to our own websites.
And subscribe to our free Substack newsletter, The Garden Angelus at substack.com, also linked to in our show notes. If you do, you'll get a link to listen to the podcast a day early.
And if you want to help support us, use those affiliate links. If you buy something after clicking through on them, we earn a small commission and it costs you nothing.
Or you can set up a monthly subscription through Buzzsprout or you can make a one-time donation through PayPal.
Thank you to everyone who has done so. It helps us pay for podcast hosting.
It was lovely to chat with all of you over the garden gate. Bye until next week.
Bye, everybody.